So I grew up in Santa Rosa, not too far, and a lot of my family is from around the Salmon Creek area out in Bodega Bay, and I loved Salmon Creek growing up. I'd huck myself off those big sand dunes, absolutely loved it, and that's kind of where my initial love for the sea came. Anyways, I'd asked as a kid, why is it called Salmon Creek? I've never seen one salmon in Salmon Creek before. And I'd ask older generations this question, and they would go on and paint this amazing romantic story, similar to what Laura talked about thousands and thousands of salmon rushing the creek, these spawning grounds so thick you could walk all over them. And as a kid, I ate that up. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I asked, why isn't it out here today? And the answer I got was always kind of the same. Now, this was back in the 90s, because I'm so old here. That was before climate change was kind of a mainstream topic. But the answer would always be, well, that's just how it is. Almost like they're extinct, like dinosaurs are extinct. It'll never come back, just how it was. But how cool is that, right? And I always thought that was an extremely lame, boring answer. And so at that moment, I was like, well, I think I want to dedicate my life to protecting the sea, to making sure that this rugged, beautiful landscape is always here, and kids who are at that age won't be disappointed by these answers. And I first got that shot to do that way later in life when I was over at Santa Junior College. I got a job with Prinza to be a naturalist out there, and it was the coolest gig. I love doing politics, a lot of fun. But the job literally was me living out of my tent in Bear Valley, no cell service, nothing, taking kids out to the coast who have never seen the ocean before. Now, I don't know if any of y'all had that experience before, or taking a kid out and never seen the Pacific Ocean before. It is the coolest thing. I mean, I feel like a Superman. I would give the kid binoculars, they'd turn around, see a gray whale, they'd turn around the other way, see a tule elk, they'd kind of look through the grass, they'd see a coyote, and you can see that connection that's going on. And as Jack alluded to, these kids nowadays are so addicted to instant gratification and screens, and it was no match for Point Reyes. I mean, it broke it. You could see that connection, that wilderness connection that is essential going forward. And I'm sure they went home, and I'm sure they went back to their screens, but I gotta believe in the back of their head there's a seed that was planted that knew that wilderness had inherent value beyond just making profits, that nature has value as its own. These romantic ideals we grew up on, and kids just don't get that nowadays. Now, I would also take in my big old van and drive them north through the ranches, and they would ask, well, actually, I would try my best to do what Laura did and say this used to be the most populated, biodiverse area in all of California, with bears and wolves and salmon. Same line I heard as a kid. So thick you can walk over them. And they would ask, Scott, why isn't it like that? Also, Scott, can you roll up the windows? It smells like cow shit. I hate this. I'm like, okay, I will. Calm down, Littleton. You can't say those words. And it's amazing. I forgot the exact same thing with the same call to action as a kid, and I would give them the same simple, lame response. And I would say, oh, this is how it is. These historic ranchers, they've been there for a while. And I realized at that moment that I was sick with cognitive dissonance, as we all are. We don't want to hear that inconvenient truth, that what we see here, the hard work we want to advocate against, is actually what we need to do. And I tell that story because I kind of want to paint this as a movement around cognitive dissonance. Because what we're really fighting against, we're fighting against ranchers, we're fighting against climate change, but we're fighting against the pursuit of going beyond convenience, right? At this stage, I don't know, there are plenty of people who come to visit the seashore who are pro-wilderness, right? Who come through, drive through the ranches and say, there's nothing wrong here, even though they probably identify as an environmentalist. And we need to override this cognitive dissonance and remind people what the purpose of the national park system is. And the national park has an obligation to preserve unimpaired natural, cultural resources of this country. And at this current moment, it is not doing that, and it is far from doing that. This reminds me of my favorite Aldo Leopold quote, and I think it just rings so true to our movement at large. Aldo Leopold once said, "Obligations have no meaning without conscience, and the problem we face is the extension of social conscience from people to land. No important change in ethics was ever accomplished without an internal change in our intellectual emphasis, loyalties, affections, and convictions." And isn't that it? That is it. We need to catalyze this paradigm shift that overrides this cognitive dissonance surrounding Point Reyes and remind the National Park Service that what affections and loyalties they are supposed to represent, and that is not the ranchers. That is not a few elite ranchers who are using my tax dollars to turn around and make a private profit to watch I see none of while polluting my favorite place in the planet, who control a third of the park, and we have to pay rent. I pay more rent for my little house in the Sunset District than they do for a freaking ranch. It's ridiculous. Who are using your tax dollars to allow agricultural waste to flow through unchecked into our ocean, who are using your tax dollars to scrape manure into vulnerable streams which destroy our fragile coastline. Folks, coho salmon are down 95% since historical numbers. And despite being protected by the Endangered Species Act for 20 years, you can't fish for them, they are disappearing due to loss of viable habitat, which is Point Reyes National Seashore. Marin County is one of the most important spawning grounds in all of California, and currently our federal government is subsidizing decimation of this critical habitat for this keystone species. They are using your money to subsidize extinction. If that doesn't piss you off, I don't know what will. On the only national seashore in the Pacific Ocean, the only one. Now, Point Reyes is a microcosm of what's going on in this country. The few elite get richer, drive climate change, and they do not to play by the same rules as us while we pick up the check. Those days are done. It's time for us as environmentalists to stop playing defense and go on the offense. It's time for us to stop telling our kids how beautiful these lands used to be and start showing them how beautiful they are to become. It's time to restore Point Reyes National Seashore. Thank you so much, everybody.